What up, doe? Welcome to the D. From the concrete of Gratiot to the hustle of 7 Mile. From the parties at Hart Plaza to the late nights on Jefferson. This is Detroit Tales and Stories, where the Motor City's realest stories come alive. We're taking you back to when the streets had their own rules, when your whip spoke louder than words, and when survival meant everything. The mid-'80s to the 2000s, when Detroit was raw, uncut, and unforgettable. These are the stories they don't tell you about, straight from the heart of the D. Detroit Tales and Stories. Real stories, real Detroit, real talk. Chapter 4, The Trap. The trip to Atlanta was planned for early August. Dev had scraped together $50,000 in cash and product, representing everything he'd saved from months of grinding on Detroit streets. Angel had arranged meetings with 3 potential clients: a music producer, a professional athlete, and an investment banker who supposedly had connections throughout the city's elite circles. The night before they were supposed to leave, Dev's pager started going off with urgent messages. His main lieutenant, a 19-year-old named Corey, was calling from a payphone sounding panicked. "Dev, man, we got problems," Corey whispered into the phone when Dev called him back. "Somebody been asking questions about you around the neighborhood." "Not customers, official-looking motherfuckers with suits and badges." "You sure they was feds?" "Had that look, you know. All clean-cut and shit. Asking Mrs. Johnson about when you come by to check on your grandmoms. They was real polite about it. But everybody know what time it is." Devonte felt his stomach drop. Federal investigations usually took months to develop, which meant they'd been watching him longer than he realized. The smart move would be to lay low, maybe even get out the game entirely until the heat died down. But he'd already committed to the Atlanta trip, and Angel was counting on him. Plus, he needed the money from the Atlanta connection to have enough cash to disappear properly if things got too hot in Detroit. "All right, just keep everything quiet until I get back," he told Corey. "Don't move nothing. Don't talk to nobody. And if them suits come around again, you ain't seen me in weeks." That night, Angel seemed more nervous than usual. She kept checking her phone and looking out the window, claiming she was just excited about the trip. But something felt off to Dev, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what. They left Detroit in Angel's car, a modest Honda Civic that wouldn't attract attention on the highway. Dev had wanted to take his Cadillac, but Angel insisted they needed to keep a low profile. The drive to Atlanta took 12 hours, with both of them taking turns behind the wheel. Angel's nervous energy seemed to increase the closer they got to their destination, but she explained it away as anxiety about returning to the city where she'd experienced so much trauma. They checked into a modest hotel on the outskirts of the city, planning to rest before the first meeting scheduled for the following evening. Angel said she needed to make some calls to confirm the arrangements, so Dev went to get ice and sodas from the vending machines. When he returned to the room, Angel was just hanging up the phone, looking pale and shaken. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yeah, just talking to my contact about tomorrow night. He's excited to meet you." Something in her tone didn't sound right, but Dev was tired from the long drive and decided not to push it. They ordered pizza and went to bed early, Angel curling up against him like she was afraid of something. The next evening, they drove to an upscale restaurant in Buckhead, where Angel said the music producer wanted to meet. Dev had dressed carefully: a navy blue silk shirt, black slacks, and his best jewelry. He was carrying $20,000 in cash and a sample of his purest product. "Remember," Angel said as they walked toward the restaurant, "these people like to feel sophisticated. Don't talk street. Don't flash your money around. Be smooth and professional." The restaurant was the kind of place Dev had never been in before. Soft lighting, real cloth napkins, and prices that made his eyes water. Angel led him to a booth in the back where a well-dressed black man in his 40s was already waiting. "Devin, I'd like you to meet Marcus," Angel said, her voice strangely formal. The man stood and extended his hand, but something in his eyes made Dev instantly alert. This wasn't the look of a music producer, it was the cold, calculating stare of a predator. Actually, the man said with a slight smile, I think there's been some confusion about who I am. Before Dev could react, he felt a sharp pain in his side. Angel had pressed a small knife against his ribs, hidden from view by the restaurant's dim lighting and the privacy of their booth. Just stay calm and nobody gets hurt, she whispered, her southern accent now completely gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. The man calling himself Marcus reached into his jacket and showed Dev a federal badge. Special Agent Johnson, DEA, and Angel here. Well, let's just say she's been working with us for quite some time. Chapter 5, Beautiful Betrayal. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. Angel, whose real name was Lisa Martinez, had been arrested in Atlanta 6 months earlier for running drugs for her actual boyfriend, a mid-level dealer named Rico. Facing 25 years in federal prison, she made a deal to work as a confidential informant. Her assignment, infiltrate Detroit's drug scene and identify major suppliers for federal prosecution. You played your role perfectly, Agent Johnson said as they sat in the back of an unmarked van parked behind the restaurant. Dev's hands were cuffed behind his back, his dreams of Atlanta money evaporating like smoke. The lonely stripper with connections, the tragic backstory, even the way you made him feel special, professional quality work. This bitch is good, better than most agents I've worked with. Lisa, Dev couldn't think of her as Angel anymore, sat across from him, her expression unreadable. Gone was the vulnerable woman who cooked dinner with his grandmother and made love to him with such apparent passion. In her place was a stranger, cold and calculating. You want to know the funny part? Agent Johnson continued. Lisa actually was married to a businessman who got in over his head with the wrong people. Everything she told you about that was true. But instead of running away, she started working for those same dangerous people until she got caught anyway. Why? Dev asked, looking directly at Lisa. Why me? For the first time since the truth had been revealed, Lisa's professional mask slipped slightly. Because you were perfect, she said quietly. Young, ambitious, successful enough to be worth our time, but not connected enough to have serious protection. And because... She stopped herself, but Agent Johnson wasn't interested in whatever personal feelings might have developed. Because you were easy, he finished. Most dealers your age are either too paranoid to trust anyone or too stupid to be worth prosecuting. You were right in the sweet spot, smart enough to run a profitable operation, but naive enough to fall for a beautiful woman with a sob story. The van pulled up to a federal building in downtown Atlanta. As they walked through the garage, Agent Johnson laid out the deal they were offering. Here's the situation, Devin. We've been building cases against major suppliers throughout the Southeast. Your cooperation could help us take down people who are destroying communities with poison. In exchange, we can recommend a reduced sentence, maybe 5 to 7 years instead of life without parole. What kind of cooperation? Dev asked, though he already knew the answer. Information about your suppliers. Names, addresses, how they move product, when and where transactions take place. Everything you know about the Detroit operation. They put him in a holding cell while he considered their offer. The cinder block walls and steel toilet were a preview of his future if he didn't cooperate. But the thought of betraying Mike and his other partners made his stomach turn. Around midnight, Lisa came to visit him. I know you hate me right now, she said, sitting on the opposite side of the bulletproof glass, and you have every right to. But I need you to understand something. Understand what? That you're a lying, manipulative bitch who fucked me to put me in a cage? That I never meant for it to go as far as it did, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The original plan was to make a couple of small buys, get enough evidence for an arrest, and move on to the next target. But when I met your grandmother, when I saw how you took care of your family, don't, Dev said, standing up from the metal chair. Don't you dare try to make this about feelings. I fell in love with you, Lisa said, tears now streaming down her face, mascara running in black streaks. I know that doesn't change anything, doesn't excuse what I did, but it's the truth. These past 3 months were the happiest I've been in years. The way you treated your grandmother, the way you looked out for your sister. I ain't never had a man show me that kind of loyalty. If you loved me, you wouldn't have set me up. If I hadn't set you up, they would have found someone else to do it, she cried, pressing her hand against the glass. At least this way, I could try to control how it went down, make sure you didn't get hurt. Baby, you gotta understand, they had me by the throat. It was either you or 25 to life. Dev looked at this woman who had shared his bed, met his family, and made him believe in the possibility of something beyond the streets. Even knowing everything he now knew, part of him still wanted to forgive her. That's how deep the manipulation had gone. What happens now? He asked him. That depends on you. You can cooperate, serve a few years, and get a chance to start over. Or you can stay loyal to people who would sell you out in a heartbeat if it meant saving themselves, and spend the rest of your life in prison. And what happens to you? I complete my assignment and hopefully disappear somewhere the government can keep me safe from Rico and his people. They're not exactly happy about me working with the feds. Dev sat back down, his mind racing through the options. Neither choice would let him return to his old life, but one offered at least the possibility of eventually building something new. Epilogue. 7 years later, Devonte walked out of the Federal Correctional Facility in Marianna, Florida, on a humid Tuesday morning in September 2001. He'd served 6 years of an 8-year sentence, earning early release for good behavior and continued cooperation with federal investigators. His testimony had helped convict 17 major dealers throughout Detroit and Atlanta, effectively dismantling several organizations and sending millions of dollars worth of drugs off the streets. The cooperation had also made him a target. He'd received death threats from prison, and there were rumors that contracts had been put out on his life by cats who lost everything when their crews got rounded up based on his information. The government had offered him witness protection, a new identity in some small town where nobody knew his history, but Dev had different plans. His grandmother had passed away 2 years into his sentence, but his sister Keisha was now 15 and living with their aunt in Atlanta. Dev had been sending money from his prison job and commissary savings, making sure she had everything she needed for school and never had to turn to the streets the way he had. At the Greyhound station, he bought a ticket to Detroit, not because he planned to return to his old life. That world was gone, and most of the people he'd known were either dead, in prison, or had moved on to other things. He was going back to visit his grandmother's grave, to say goodbye properly, and to close that chapter of his life. As the bus pulled away from the station, Dev thought about Lisa. He'd heard through the prison grapevine that she'd completed her deal with the government and been relocated somewhere on the West Coast. Part of him wondered if she ever thought about those 3 months in Detroit, if she remembered the way she'd made him feel before everything fell apart. But he knew better than to romanticize what had happened between them. Lisa had been doing a job and he'd been a mark. The fact that real feelings might have developed didn't change the fundamental nature of their relationship. The bus rolled through the Florida countryside, heading north toward whatever came next. Devonte closed his eyes and tried to imagine a future that didn't involve looking over his shoulder, didn't require bulletproof glass and hidden compartments. But he knew the truth. Once you violate the street code, there's no going back. You carry that mark forever. In the game, loyalty was everything. It was the difference between life and death, between family and enemies. He traded his honor for his freedom, and somewhere deep in his soul, he wondered if it had been worth it. Only time would tell if he could build something meaningful from the ashes of his reputation. For the first time in years, that future didn't seem impossible, but it would have to be earned through more than just surviving his sentence. Real redemption required facing the consequences of breaking the code that had once defined him. That's another chapter from the Tales and Stories, fam. If these stories take you back to the D you remember or help you understand the D you never knew, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Drop a comment and tell us your Detroit story. What block you claimed, what party store you remember, what ride you were pushing. Follow us on the gram at Detroit Tales and Stories for behind the scenes content and rare photos from the era. Until next time, keep the D alive in your heart. Peace.